The phone buzzed at 11:52 p.m. I was sitting in the dark, half asleep in front of a television I wasn't watching, when the screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected to see that night. Rebecca. My daughter. I picked up on the second ring. Dad? Something was wrong with her voice right away. It cracked in the middle of one syllable. For a second, I thought one of the kids had gotten hurt. Rebecca, what's going on? A pause. Then I heard her breathing change, the way it does right before someone starts crying and is trying not to. Dad, why are you all over Facebook? I sat up straight. My back complained about it immediately, same as it always does now. What are you talking about? Someone shared a video. It's got like 80,000 views. Dad, it's you. I looked toward the window, toward the driveway, toward nothing in particular, the way you do when your brain needs a second to catch up to a sentence. Sweetheart, slow down. She took a breath that shook on the way out. I didn't know. Before she said another word, I already understood what she meant. Because 8 hours earlier, my daughter had told me there wasn't room for me at Thanksgiving. That wasn't even the worst conversation we'd had that year. Not by a long way. The worst ones never come with shouting. They come quiet, almost polite, which somehow makes them worse. 4 days before that phone call, I'd been sitting at my kitchen table in Lubbock, Texas, sorting through a stack of mail I'd been ignoring for a week, telling myself that retirement was supposed to feel more peaceful than this. My house had gotten quiet a long time ago. My wife Diane and I split up 11 years back, and since then I'd built myself a life out of small, manageable routines. Coffee for one. Leftovers stretched into 2 dinners. A dog named Rusty, who used to keep me company until his hips gave out on him 2 winters ago. And after that, I just talked to an empty kitchen. It wasn't tragic. It was just smaller than it used to be. The good part of my life had always been Rebecca and her 2 boys, Caleb and Josh. I taught Rebecca to drive in an empty church parking lot the same way my own father had taught me. I sat through a decade of dance recitals and band concerts that ran twice as long as they needed to. I helped her move into her first apartment, then her second, then out of a bad marriage and into a better one. That's what a father does. At least that's what I always believed. My phone rang that Tuesday afternoon. Rebecca. I smiled before I even answered, the way you do out of pure habit. Hey, kiddo. Hi, Dad. Something in her voice was off before she said another word. You learn to hear it. Doesn't matter if your kid is 8 or 38, you just know. Everything all right? I asked. Yeah, she said, way too fast. Then nothing. I leaned back in my chair. What is it, Beck? Another pause, longer this time. Finally, she said it. Mark's parents are hosting Thanksgiving this year, and we kind of need the whole day for that. Mark, her husband of 9 years. His folks live 40 minutes outside of town. Big house, big family, the kind of gathering where there's a separate kids' table and a football game running in 3 different rooms. Nothing wrong with any of that. Okay, I said carefully. So what time should I be there? Silence. That silence told me everything before she said one more word. Dad, she started, then stopped. Started again. This year might just be easier if it's just us and them. I didn't say anything for a second. I genuinely wasn't sure I'd heard her right. So she kept going, filling the quiet the way people do when they know they've said something they can't take back. We're trying to give the boys one holiday that isn't split into pieces. Driving here, driving there, it's a lot for them. I looked over at the little turkey centerpiece I put out every November, the same ceramic one Rebecca made in 3rd grade, chipped on one wing, glued back together twice. I'd kept it for 30 years. Apparently longer than she'd kept a place for me. Dad, you still there? Yeah, I said. Yeah, I'm here. Please don't make this into something, she said. That almost made me laugh, except there wasn't a version of that sentence that wasn't already something. But I could hear how uncomfortable she was, how she already knew what she was doing and just wanted my permission to keep doing it. So I gave it to her. It's fine, sweetheart. Really? Sure. The lie slid out easier than I expected it to. We talked another minute about nothing important, and then the call ended. And I sat at that table for a long time listening to the refrigerator hum and the heater click on and off. I wasn't angry. Not right away. Mostly I just felt tired. The specific kind of tired that settles into a man once he's past 60. The kind that has nothing to do with sleep. The next morning I went out and bought presents anyway, because old habits don't check in with your feelings first. A remote-controlled dump truck for Josh. a set of watercolors for Caleb, who'd started drawing everything in the house, including the walls. For Rebecca, I didn't buy anything expensive. I made something instead. Over the next 3 nights, I sat at that same kitchen table with a box of old photographs I'd been meaning to organize for a decade, and I built her a scrapbook. Her first day of kindergarten, her softball trophies. Her wedding day, the good one, the one to mark. 29 years compressed into 90 pages. By the night before Thanksgiving, it was finished, wrapped in brown paper, because I never learned to wrap anything properly. I loaded it into my truck along with the boys' gifts and told myself I was just dropping things off. Nothing more. No speech, no standing at the door waiting to be invited in. Thanksgiving morning came in gray and cold, the kind of West Texas cold that gets into your knees before it gets into your bones. I was awake by 5:30 out of habit, even though there was nowhere I needed to be. I made coffee, watched a couple of mockingbirds fight over the feeder, and kept looking at my phone even though I told myself I wasn't waiting for anything. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd say, "Dad, forget what I said. Just come on over." The phone stayed exactly where I left it. Around 10, I drove across town to her neighborhood, one of those newer developments where every lawn looks like it was measured with a ruler. I sat in her driveway for a full minute before I got out. Through the front window, I could see the glow of a television, movement, the shape of people already laughing about something. I almost walked up, almost knocked. Instead, I carried the gifts to the porch, set the scrapbook on top, and turned around before I could change my mind. The whole thing took less than 90 seconds, still hurt like somebody had reached into my chest and squeezed. I drove off before anyone came outside. Maybe before I let myself see them. I spent the afternoon doing nothing that mattered. Reheated some brisket from a barbecue place downtown that had gone dry sitting in my fridge for 2 days. Watched half a football game I didn't care about. Around 4, I pulled out an old box of home movies I'd converted to disc years back, and there was Rebecca at 7 years old, missing her front teeth, learning to ride a bike in that same church parking lot. "Don't let go," she was yelling. "You got it," my younger voice said back. Then I let go anyway. She rode 20 feet before she figured out she was on her own, and the look on her face nearly broke something in my chest all over again. Watching it now, all these years later, alone in a recliner on a holiday nobody wanted me at. By early evening, the house felt smaller than it usually did. Around 7, I put my coat on and actually got as far as my truck keys before I stopped myself. I thought about driving back over there, not to start a fight, not to force my way to the table, just to stand outside and see the boys through the window for a minute. Then I thought about what it would mean to beg for a seat at a table that used to be mine without asking. I hung the coat back up. It hurt, but it also felt like the first honest decision I'd made all week. A little after 8, my phone buzzed, and it wasn't Rebecca. It was a message from the volunteer fire department I'd been riding with 3 or 4 times a month since I retired from 26 years working line crews for the power company. A cold front had rolled in fast, temperatures dropping into the teens, and there'd been reports of a family stranded on the county road after their car slid into a culvert. They needed hands. I texted back, "On my way," grabbed my old work coat, and drove out into weather that was getting worse by the mile. The road out past the Cawthorn place was already glazed with ice by the time I got there. I spotted the flashers before I saw the car. A sedan tipped nose down into a drainage ditch, hazards blinking weakly in the dark. Not a bad wreck, but bad enough in that cold. I pulled over, grabbed my flashlight, and called it in before I even got the door shut behind me. Inside the car was a young mother, maybe 30, and 2 kids in the back seat, one of them crying hard enough that I could hear it before I got close. "I'm David," I told her through the window. "Help's coming, and you're going to be all right." That's the thing about a bad situation. People can handle almost anything except not knowing what happens next. I got the back door open, got both kids wrapped in blankets from my truck, and kept talking, kept my voice steady, the way 26 years of line work teaches you to do when somebody's scared and cold and looking at you like you're the only calm thing left in the world. That's when I saw it. A transformer on a pole about 30 yards up, sparking, one line hanging lower than it should have been, close enough to the ditch that I didn't like it one bit. I told the mother to keep the kids inside the car and away from that side of the road. No exceptions, and I stayed right there between them and that pole until the fire crew and a lineman from my old company showed up. By the time they cut power to that section and got the family clear, my hands were half frozen and my knee, the same one I'd had scoped twice, had twisted wrong on a patch of ice I never saw coming. I went down hard enough that a young firefighter had to help me back up. "You all right, old-timer?" "Depends how old you think I look tonight," I told him, and he laughed. And I didn't, because my knee felt about 90 years old. A local news van showed up not long after, the way they always seem to find these things. A reporter in a parka asked me a few questions while the EMTs wrapped my hand. I answered without thinking much about it. I was cold, my knee was swelling, and television was about the last thing on my mind. The EMTs wanted me to go get checked out at the hospital. I wanted my own bed and a heating pad. We compromised. By the time I got home, it was almost midnight. The whole street dark and quiet, everybody else's Thanksgiving long since wrapped up in leftovers and dishes. I eased myself into my recliner, my knee protesting the whole way down, and I just closed my eyes when the phone started buzzing. Not once. Over and over, texts and missed calls stacking up faster than I could make sense of them. Then Rebecca called and I answered right away. "Dad?" Her voice wasn't nervous anymore. It was shaken all the way through. "Rebecca, what's wrong?" A long silence, and then I heard her crying. The real kind, not the kind people do for show. "Dad, why is your face all over Facebook?" I sat straight up. "What?" "You're on the volunteer fire department's page, and somebody local shared it, and it's everywhere." "Dad, why didn't you tell me where you were tonight?" I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because 8 hours earlier she'd told me exactly where I wasn't supposed to be. "Didn't think it mattered," I said, and that landed harder than I meant it to. Silence again. Finally she whispered, "Dad," and then nothing else, like she couldn't find the next word. We said goodnight, awkward and unfinished, no apology yet, no explanation either. I set the phone down. 2 minutes later it rang again. Diane, my ex-wife. I stared at the screen a second before I picked up. "David, I just saw it," she said, sounding more unsettled than I'd heard her in years. "You okay?" "Nothing serious," I told her. "Good," she said, then a long pause. "Rebecca's pretty upset. I imagine she is," I said. Diane sighed, the kind of sigh people make when they realize a problem isn't going to just quietly disappear. "Maybe give her some time," she said, and then we hung up. 5 minutes after that, Mark called, and I almost didn't pick up. Almost. "David," he said, way too cheerful for midnight. "Quite a night, huh?" I leaned back. "Apparently. I just wanted to say that was really something," he went on, filling the silence the way he always did, talking about the ice storm, the news coverage, how crazy everything was, until finally he landed on, "Rebecca feels terrible about all this." I didn't say anything. He kept going. "She didn't mean to hurt you, Dave." I still didn't say anything, because whether she meant it or not had stopped being the point. He gave up eventually and hung up, and I figured that was the end of it for the night. It wasn't, not even close. By the next morning, I had dozens of messages, old coworkers from the power company, neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years, people from my church. Everybody had apparently seen the clip. I spent half the morning typing some version of "I'm fine, thank you for checking." Around noon, an old coworker sent me a link and wrote, "Have you seen this yet?" I clicked it. It wasn't the rescue footage. It was a 20-second clip pulled from the reporter's interview, already sitting at thousands of views. The reporter had asked me, straight up, "Do you have family waiting for you tonight?" I barely remembered answering. I'd been half frozen and distracted. But there I was on the screen, giving her the plain truth without thinking twice about it. "Not tonight," I said in the clip. "No Thanksgiving plans?" she asked. I shook my head. "My daughter told me there wasn't room for me this year." That was the whole clip, 20 seconds. No anger in it, no blame, just a tired man telling the truth on the side of a dark road. People couldn't stop sharing it. Underneath it, thousands of comments, most of them not even about the rescue anymore. People telling their own stories about being pushed out, about holidays spent alone, about children who forgot where they came from. Around 4 that afternoon, a text came in from Rebecca. Just 3 words. "Can we talk?" I read it twice and set the phone down. Not out of anger, just because I genuinely didn't know what I wanted to say yet. A few minutes later, a longer message. "Dad, I found the scrapbook. I found the last page." My chest went tight because I knew exactly which page she meant. The very last one, where I'd written, "by hand. No matter whose table you sit at, You'll always be my girl. I sat with that for a long while before another notification came in. This one from a reporter with the Lubbock paper wanting to talk to me. Not about the rescue, she said, but about me. I ignored her for 2 days, which at 63 years old I've decided is a right I've earned. The attention bothered me more than the ice or the cold ever had. I've spent my whole working life fixing things quietly so the lights come back on and nobody throws you a parade for it. But the reporter, a woman named Angela Cruz, kept calling, kept leaving messages until I finally called her back mostly to get her to stop. Turned out she wasn't interested in the wreck at all. She'd been making calls, talking to people from my old crew, from church, from the volunteer department, and they kept telling her stories I'd half forgotten myself. A neighbor mentioned the winter I rewired her whole porch for free after her husband passed. A former coworker brought up a scholarship fund I'd quietly kept paying into at the community college for going on 9 years. The volunteer captain told her I'd been writing calls with them longer than most of the paid guys had been alive. I told Angela none of that mattered. She said that was exactly why it did. That answer bothered me because it sounded smarter than anything I'd come up with. Meanwhile, Rebecca kept texting. Small things, nothing heavy, asking about my knee, my hand, how I was sleeping. I answered politely, but something in me had shifted. Not out of spite, I just didn't feel the old urgency to fix things for her anymore, the way I always had. One afternoon, she called while I was out in the garage replacing a busted hinge. "Hey, Dad, can we get lunch sometime?" I tightened a bolt before I answered. Maybe. That single word surprised both of us, because for 38 years my answer to her had always just been yes. A few days after that, a second story broke, this one involving Mark, in a roundabout way. A local station did a follow-up piece on the rescue, and somehow Mark ended up standing in front of a camera, describing me as practically a second father to him, talking about how close our whole family was, how much they valued togetherness. The trouble wasn't what he said. It was that Rebecca happened to be standing right beside him when the reporter turned to her and asked, casual as anything, "Did your dad always do this kind of volunteer work?" She hesitated. Just a second, but a second's enough on live television, and enough for the internet, which noticed everything Mark's version of the story conveniently left out. If we're all so close, people started asking, why did David spend Thanksgiving alone? Nobody in that family had a good answer, especially not Mark. And for the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncomfortable in front of a camera instead of chasing one. A week after that, Angela called again. "You're not going to believe this." "Then don't tell me," I said. "Too late," she said, laughing. "You're getting an award." The city was putting together a community appreciation dinner, honoring volunteers, first responders, people who'd quietly shown up all year. My name had somehow ended up on the list. I tried turning it down twice. The organizers wouldn't hear it. By then I'd learned that once enough people decide you're worth honoring, your own opinion on the matter stops counting for much. The invitation sat on my counter for almost 2 weeks before I finally accepted it wasn't going away. The dinner was held at the Civic Center on a cold Saturday night in early December. I almost didn't go, twice. I dug an old sport coat out of the closet, sleeves tighter than I remembered, and drove downtown telling myself I'd stay for 20 minutes and leave. The lobby was full of the kind of small talk I've never been any good at, teachers and firefighters and city council folks shaking hands and glancing at name tags. I found the coffee station and was pouring a cup when I spotted them across the room. Rebecca, Mark, Diane, and the boys standing near one of the sponsor tables. For a second, nobody moved. Rebecca saw me first, and her face did about 4 things at once: nervous, hopeful, guilty, all layered on top of each other. I raised a hand, just a small wave. She waved back. Mark nodded. Diane gave me a careful, tired sort of smile. Then the crowd shifted and closed the gap between us, and part of me was relieved for it. The program moved along the way these things do, teachers and coaches and foster families getting their moment, until the host walked up holding a card with my name on it. "Our next honoree," he said, "is someone who reminded this town what quiet service actually looks like." The screen behind him lit up with pictures I didn't know existed. Me on the fire department's page, me at a food drive, me standing by that car in the ditch. I considered the side exit seriously for about 3 seconds. Then they called me up. I made it to the stage on a knee that still wasn't thrilled about stairs, shook the host's hand, answered a couple of easy questions about how long I'd volunteered and why. Then he asked me the one I hadn't prepared for. "Looking back on that night, David, What was the hardest part? I opened my mouth expecting to say something about the cold or the ice, something safe. Instead, the truth came out plain and unplanned. Getting that family out of the ditch wasn't the hardest part, I said. Everybody worked together, and it went about as well as it could have. The hardest part was finding out my own daughter didn't think there was room for me at her table this year. The room went dead silent, the kind of silence that happens when nobody knows what to do with what they just heard. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't named names, didn't need to. I found Rebecca in the crowd, both hands pressed over her mouth, tears running quiet down her face, the kind people try hard to hide. For a second, I regretted saying it, not because it wasn't true, but because once you say a true thing out loud in a room full of people, you can't take it back. The host just nodded and said, "Thank you for your honesty," and let it sit there instead of trying to smooth it over, and the room applauded, soft at first, then louder. Not for what I'd said, but for the fact that I'd said it. After the ceremony broke up and the crowd thinned, I was halfway to the parking lot when I heard, "Dad." Rebecca was standing there alone. Neither of us said anything for a second, and then she wrapped her arms around me the way she used to when she was small, before either of us had any reason to hold back. I hugged her back, because whatever had happened, she was still my daughter. When she pulled away, her eyes were red and swollen. "I'm so sorry," she said. No excuses attached to it, no mention of Mark or her mother, just those 4 words. I nodded. "Thank you," I told her. "That's all?" she asked, confused. "What else is there?" I said, and I meant it. "Can we fix this?" she asked, and I actually thought about it for longer than she probably expected. "Maybe," I finally said, the same word I'd given her weeks before. Not yes, not no. Maybe. Forgiveness can happen fast. Trust takes its own time, and she seemed to understand that without me spelling it out, because for once, she wasn't asking for an instant fix. We didn't become the postcard version of father and daughter after that night. She didn't start showing up every Sunday with a pie. I didn't pretend Thanksgiving hadn't happened the way it had. We moved slow, careful, like 2 people crossing a frozen pond neither of us fully trusted yet. The first week she called twice, and I picked up both times, and we talked about nothing heavy, the boys, her job, my knee. The second week she asked if she could bring Caleb and Josh over for lunch, and I said yes, and then spent the whole morning cleaning a house that didn't need it. At 11:30 she texted, "Josh has a fever. Can we push it back?" I sat with that message longer than I should have. Felt the old instinct kick in to just swallow it and say, "It's fine, don't worry about it." Instead I typed, "Sure, let me know when works," and left it there. No extra reassurance. Just a boundary, small as it was, but mine. Over the following months I made some quiet changes, the kind nobody notices from the outside until they matter. I sat down with my attorney, a sharp older woman named Carol Whitfield whose office always smelled like burnt coffee, and we went through my will, my power of attorney, all the paperwork I'd been putting off for a decade. She asked if I was doing this out of anger. "No," I told her, out of clarity. I didn't cut Rebecca out of anything. That was never the point. But part of what I have will go into a trust for the boys' schooling, and part of it will keep going to the scholarship fund, and part of it stays with the volunteer department. For years, I treated my family like the only proof my life had meant anything. That was my mistake. They mattered. They just weren't the only thing that did. A month or so later, Rebecca called asking for help with a down payment on a car. Old me would have said yes before she finished the sentence. This time I asked questions. "What happened to the savings you and Mark had put aside?" "Mark thought it'd be smarter in some land deal his cousin's running," she admitted. There it was. Mark again. I closed my eyes a second, not angry, just worn down by the familiarity of it. "Beck, I can't do that one," I told her. Silence. "You can't," she repeated. "No," I said. "It's not about Thanksgiving. It's that I'm retired now, and I need to stop bailing out decisions I didn't make." That landed. I heard it land. She didn't argue, just said, "Okay," quiet. And a week later she called again. Not for money, just to talk, which felt like the first real sign that something between us was actually shifting instead of just healing over on the surface. Winter eased into spring the way it does in West Texas, slow and stubborn. My knee still ached whenever a front rolled through, but I stopped mentioning it out loud so much. I kept writing calls with the fire department, kept working food drives, kept helping folks fill out paperwork they didn't understand. One afternoon, a woman walked into the community center. I'd started helping run 3 days a week, 70-something, silver hair, sharp eyes, the posture of somebody who decided a long time ago she wasn't going to be pitied by anybody. She pointed right at me. "You?" she said. "The man who wouldn't let me apologize for walking slow that night in the ditch." I laughed. "You were apologizing plenty." Her name was Margaret Sellers, and she started coming by every Thursday after that, organizing the donated coats with the seriousness of a woman running a military supply line. Rebecca met her once, and it was stiff at first, until Margaret shook her hand and said, plain as day, "Your father's stubborn, but he's useful." Rebecca laughed. So did I. That laugh felt like a small repair, not the whole thing, but enough to notice. By early summer, Rebecca and I were having dinner once a month, just the two of us. No Mark, no pressure to perform anything. Some nights we talked about old memories. Some nights we talked about what had actually gone wrong, and those conversations were uncomfortable at first. One evening over meatloaf at a diner outside town, she said, "I think I was so busy trying not to upset Mark's family that I forgot I was hurting you." I cut a piece of meatloaf and said, "That sounds about right." She winced. I didn't take it back, not to hurt her, just because a true thing spoken gently is still allowed to be true. "I know," she said, and that was enough for the moment. In August, a letter came from the state, something about a Texas senior volunteer recognition, and I nearly threw it out with the junk mail before Angela Cruz called to tell me it was real. Formal ceremony up in Austin, one invited guest. Rebecca didn't ask directly who I'd be bringing, but I could hear the hope sitting quietly underneath her voice when she brought it up. "That's wonderful, Dad," she said. "Strange, but wonderful," I told her. "Do you know who you're taking?" she asked. And there it was, the real question underneath the polite one. I looked out at my backyard, at the bird feeder, at the empty spot on the porch where Rusty used to nap in the sun. "I do," I told her. A pause. "Oh," she said, not angry, just quiet. "I'm taking Margaret," I said. Another pause, and then she surprised me. "That's good, Dad. She should be there." I could hear the disappointment underneath it, and the understanding sitting right alongside it, and that was the moment I knew we might actually be all right somewhere down the road. Not because she got what she wanted, but because she'd learned to accept what she didn't. The ceremony in Austin turned out nicer than I expected. Margaret wore a navy dress and complained about the parking garage for a solid 20 minutes beforehand. When they called my name, she squeezed my arm and whispered, "Don't trip." And I told her thanks for the vote of confidence, and she said, "Anytime." Like she meant it. I walked up onto that stage with a knee that still ached in the cold, a waistline wider than it was at 40, and a heart that had finally stopped chasing the wrong kind of approval. Afterward, Margaret and I got dinner at a little place near the river. She ordered pie, I ordered coffee, and we talked about nothing important, the weather, bad drivers, good soup. On the drive home, my phone buzzed once. A text from Rebecca. "Proud of you, Dad." I smiled, set the phone down, and didn't pick it back up right away. Not because I didn't care, but because for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't need a message from my daughter to make the night mean something on its own. That was the only kind of getting back at somebody I ever wanted. No shouting, no scene, no ruined holiday for anybody. Just an old man learning, slower than he should have, that love was never supposed to come with an application process. I still love my daughter. I always will. But I don't mistake being needed for being wanted anymore. And I've stopped saving a seat at my own table for people who only remember I'm there when a camera happens to be pointed my way. Sometimes the people you gave your whole life to forget your worth until a stranger has to remind them for you. If anyone reading this has ever been the one left off the guest list by the people who were supposed to save you a seat, I want you to hear this from somebody who's been there. You still matter. And if any part of this sounded like your own life, tell it in the comments below. Somebody out there tonight needs to hear that they're not the only one. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard, and you don't have to earn a seat at a table that was always supposed to be yours. Keep showing up for people quietly. Keep loving even when it isn't returned right away. And let your worth rest in what you do, not in who notices. Sometimes the people you gave everything to just need a little time and a little truth to finally see you clearly. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its little life lessons still found a warm place in your heart.